chocolate is going to become pricier. There's a flippant component to this, which is shock, horror. What? We're going to have to pay more for chocolate. That plays into our inflation concerns, and it's a concern for chocolate lovers out there. But there's the real and important and serious component as well, which is this is also a question about land, but it's also a question about labor as well.
Yeah, it's a question about all of these things that a lot of growers, a lot of top producing countries have been talking about for a while, but this is actually a law that's going to be forcing them to implement some of these specific changes. So you mentioned imminent. It actually is going into law today. And so what it essentially seeks to do, as you mentioned, it is trying to cut down on EU consumption of harmful environmental products, of harmful environmental practices. So you mentioned deforested land, you mentioned things like child labor, and really what the onus is this is trying to cut down on what it is that these farmers are actually potentially going to be doing or potentially going to be exposed to. And so really what it seeks, really who's going to be impacted, as you mentioned, are the consumers, but it's going to be a lot of the companies that are going to have to implement this and going to have to pass on the cost to the consumer. So people like Nestle, Ferrero, and Mars are really going to have to crack down on this law.
Okay, another higher input cost for them to have to contend with.
Yeah.
Is this being welcomed in places like Ivory Coast and Ghana? And what are you expecting to see next in terms of the production of cocoa out of those countries?
Yeah, so at the heart of this is really the cost, right? Because to be compliant, it's going to be expensive. And so what we've heard from the Ghanaians and also from the Ivory Coast, the two top producers of cocoa, is really their concern about who is going to have to, bear the brunt of this cost. They've already been stressed out and frustrated over the lack of benefits that they actually receive from the $100 billion chocolate industry. And so now they're going to have to, add on additional costs for traceability systems and other things like that. And that could affect, their own incomes at this point in time. And so, a few weeks ago, I was speaking to the Ghanaian president who was saying that he believes that the country is going to be compliant and that the crops are compliant with this new law. But there's concern about really how this is going to continue to put more pressure on the consumers, on the farmers, on inflation altogether. And so, we're really going to have to see how this plays out over the next 18 months when this is really going to be implemented.